Hello, filthy Earth human audience. I am your very human host with BickedWinge, or whatever you call it.
What are you doing here, stink meat?
And today we'll be discussing the most gloriously evil deeds of Zim. Wait, there are good ones too? Well, most of them will be evil, don't you worry. This is Invader Zim's deeds, good-ish to evil. As you might expect for a diabolical alien invader, there aren't all too many deeds that could be considered fully good by our standards. But there have been some times where Zim has been a help to humanity, albeit only for necessity for his own plans. That said, prepare your inferior human brains. These are the good-ish deeds. First up is encouraging the mall prisoners. When Zim has to return an overdue movie Gur has been watching on repeat, he ends up captured by Slab Rankle, a corrupt, unstable mall security guard. He takes his job way too seriously, making prisoners of anyone who breaks even the most minor of rules and eventually turning them into zombies. When Zim gets captured as well for coming in after hours, he shows some surprising altruism, encouraging his fellow prisoners to work together and make a human staircase so they can escape.
You can get out of this cell if you only believe that you can!
Okay, considering he never came back for them, it was probably just so he could escape. But still, considering Zim didn't taunt the puny humans once he got out, this is definitely one of his nicer moments. This next entry is just precious. Who's this big fuzzy wuzzy guy? Wait, defeating Ultra PP is a good deed?
Obey your creator!
Who could possibly bring themselves to hurt this guy? Well, adorable as he is, he was quite a danger to the people of Zim's town, and possibly the whole world. Once a regular pet hamster of Miss Bitter's class, it came to be through Zim's experimentation. The plan was to use this once normal, now monstrous hamster to rule the world with his mesmerizing cuteness. Once Ultra PP was on track to crush Zim's house, he knew what had to be done, launching him into space. Sure, he only acted once his own lair was in peril, but he did save the city, or what was left of it. He even kind of comforted a crying kid by telling him that Ultra PP will live on somewhere, and the end screen of the episode reveals that he wasn't harmed in the making of this episode. Well, despite the explosion in the background, that may be true, but in the case of Zim defeating the Planet Jackers, we have our fair share of doubts that they got out unscathed. And honestly, we aren't too sorry about it. These two are some of the few characters who can rival Zim in their evilness, getting great enjoyment out of throwing planets into their sun, especially if they have critters on them.
Lots of critters burn good.
When they steal the Earth with intent to do the same to it, Zim fights them tooth and nail to get it back, taking quite a beating in the process. While he holds off the muscle of the team, the ship's equipment breaks the shell around Earth. Thanks to Zim, Earth is saved from a fiery doom. At least, from a fiery doom at anyone else's hands. We can also give him some credit for stopping the Planet Jackers, considering that the episode's final scene shows them flying into the sun. It's likely safe to say they won't be causing any more trouble down the line. Saving the planet on its own is pretty darn impressive, but what could make it even more impressive is teaming up with your archenemy to do it. Enter Zim defeating Tack. The special episode Tack, the Hideous New Girl, sees Zim facing off against another Urkin named Tack who wants to steal his mission to conquer Earth away from him. No doubt in part due to her grudge against him. Zim's reckless behavior caused her to miss her chance to become an official invader, so she decided to take matters into her own hands, considering him utterly unworthy of his mission, with a deadly plan that involves draining the core of the Earth. This ultimately results in Zim and Gur teaming up with Dib and Gaz to defeat Tack. It's no secret that Zim absolutely hates Dib, and of course, the feeling is quite mutual. So the fact that he was willing to put their differences aside to save the planet is pretty respectable, given how much more intelligent Tack was than Zim, and how well thought out her plan was. It's safe to say Earth is honestly in better hands with Zim, if for no other reason, for the fact that he's much less likely to come up with such a smart plan. Now, at the risk of sounding redundant, we have to re-emphasize that pretty much all of these good deeds are done to ensure Zim's mission to destroy humanity and Earth as a whole are successful. But there is one exception to this theme, and that's Zim and Gur's relationship. Acting as a foil to Zim, his adorable robot minion Gur isn't really interested in destroying the planet. He'd rather eat tacos, watch TV, have dance parties, and enjoy other facets of Earth culture. It's worth noting that while Zim is pretty darn incompetent, Gur makes him look like a downright genius. He's insane, unpredictable, and probably does even more to screw up Zim's plans than Dib does. On a few occasions, he sets up cameras in their lair after Dib just asks him politely, and one of those aforementioned dance parties was was with him. So why do we mention their relationship as Zim's best deed? Simple. As much as he may insist Gur is a nuisance, there's no doubt that he loves the little guy. With how incompetent and downright troublesome Gur is, it's a miracle Zim hasn't even tried once to get rid of him. On the contrary, Zim shows compassion for Gur, often acting more like an exasperated older brother figure than a boss. He's got a soft spot for Gur, and is swayed by his tears easily. Examples include letting him play with the rubber piggies he was using for one of his evil plans, and trying his homemade waffles made with waffle in them. He also caters to his whims quite often, whether that means watching cartoons with him or giving him candy when he's freaked out. The episode Gur Goes Crazy and Stuff sees Zim successfully put Gur in a duty mode, indefinitely, but when this makes him even more destructive, he decides to accept Gur the way he is, even knowing full well that Gur is going to cause him a lot of trouble on his mission. Zim still wants to keep him around. These two prove that even being evil can't stop you from discovering friendship, so we're giving this dynamic duo's friendship the gold medal of good. Oh, you want the evil? We'll give you evil. Oh, such evil we will give. In the evil deeds section, we begin with psychological manipulation with the natural purpose of extorting candy sales. In Door to Door, Zim and Gur go door to door selling delicious candy made of only the finest sawdust. Odd choice, but if Gur likes it, it can't be all bad. Zim isn't typically one to do things by the book, and when he realizes that selling like a weak, inferior human doesn't work well, he resorts to psychologically torturing his customers by giving them visions of a horrible future in which the world is in ruins because they didn't buy his candy. After this proves effective, he starts bullying the rest of the town into buying them, Zim style. We hope it was worth it for those adhesive medical strips, Zim. Visions of world domination could be pretty terrifying, but what about having the entire universe shown your most embarrassing private moments? Embarrassing Dib is a deed many may not have heard of, and that's because it takes place in the first volume of the Invader Zim comic books. If you're craving more of Zim after finishing the cartoon and the movie, these comics are a great continuation, and the beginning of this first volume is actually the first act of the Invader Zim movie, Into the Florpus, which we'll get to later. But while this comic is technically a continuation of the cartoon, it goes in quite a different direction from the movie. When Dib suspects that Zim has a dastardly plan, he follows him into space on a ship, going to planet after planet to find him. Once he tracks him down, Zim has already succeeded in his grand plan, to show the entire universe video recording of Dib's embarrassing time and depression, thinking Zim disappeared, including one panel of him stating that he'd had one of those farts. This might not have been a world-threatening plan, but it's one of the most downright mean things Zim has done. We wouldn't wish this on our worst enemy, and even though that's precisely what Dib is to Zim, it's still really messed up. Next, we have the utterly vile deed of making a child happy forever. Let's get into the context about neural experiment number 231. In the episode Zim Eats Waffles, we find out that Zim has a human test subject, a boy named Nick. The test we see firsthand is a gigantic brain probe which forces him to feel constant joy and ecstasy, even when things around him are utterly horrific, like Zim being attacked by an army of robot zombies. This is pretty messed up on its own, but it's even freakier when you take into account that Zim refers to him as neural experiment number 231. On one hand, knowing Zim, this could totally just be him choosing a random number that he likes. On the other hand, it could mean that he's experimented on over 200 humans, or maybe the same one over 200 times. We can't confirm it, so we won't place it any higher, but manipulating someone's brain is pretty bad, and considering he's seen in Zim's ship in the episode The Girl Who Cried Gnome, it's safe to say that Zim won't be letting his little friend go anytime soon. But hey, at least Zim technically made this kid happy. We're not so sure we could say the same for the time Zim took Keef's eyeballs out. There's no shortage of morbid moments in Invader Zim, but this was definitely one of the most memorable and horrifying. In the very second episode, Bestest Friend, Zim becomes friends with a boy named Keef to seem less suspicious to the kids at school. On a surface level, there's nothing particularly evil about this, but when Keef becomes a nuisance, Zim gives him a surprise gift to get him out of his hair. This gift is a machine that tears his eyeballs out and inserts new ones to brainwash him into seeing a squirrel as his best friend. If Keef's blood-curdling scream is anything to go by, this was pretty horrific for him. We're honestly surprised it got past the censors, but we aren't particularly surprised it got past Zim's moral filter.
Humans and their friendship.
But as awful of a deed that is, it's nothing compared to the destruction he causes in the next few entries. If anyone's taken the brunt of Zim's torment, it's gotta be Dib. He's done horrible things to his arch nemesis, but the worst has to be the time Zim managed to nearly kill Dib. Yes, really, in the episode Bad Bad Rubber Piggy, Zim uses an incredibly dangerous machine that replaces objects in the past with different ones, more specifically rubber piggies. He uses this power to repeatedly injure Dib and traumatize him. This starts with replacing replacing a tricycle he was riding with a piggy, resulting in him being injured. As time goes on, he replaces more of Dib's memories with the horrible Piggies, bringing the poor guy closer and closer to the brink of death.
More piggies, Gur! I demand piggies!
And when he replaces a paramedic's defibrillators with Piggies, Dib actually flatlines. But unfortunately for Zim, Professor Membrane builds a deadly mech suit for his son, and as a result, Zim has to warn his past self to never use the machine. Still, despite its failure, this is the closest Zim ever came to explicitly murdering Dib, so it's definitely one of his most infamous deeds. Zim's penchant for violence doesn't begin and end with humans, as he's even gotten fellow aliens killed during his time on Hobo 13. When Zim is sent to this boot camp-esque planet to try and become qualified for better equipment from the tallest, he immediately declares himself the leader of his squadron.
Are we going to have trouble, soldier?
Unsurprisingly, he doesn't do a good job. He actually does a pretty terrible one, using his allies as expendable resources to pave his way to victory. This even includes poor Invader Scooch, who is an Urkin invader, showing he doesn't even care enough to help his own kind. It might not have been Zim's most malicious plot, but it shows that as long as he gets or destroys whatever he wants, he doesn't really care about anything else. And we'll be seeing more of that carelessness as we go. Our next entry makes that seem utterly tame in comparison. It's ruthless, it's horrible, it's a room with a moose. One of Zim's most ingenious plans included him sending the kids of Miss Bitter's class on a fake field trip. In actuality, this was a fake school bus intended to take them to a horrible dimension he deemed worse than a dimension full of endless itchiness or even dookie. It was a soulless moose with no limits to its madness. When Zim displays him snacking on walnuts, it's clear the moose isn't messing around, and if Dib's reaction is anything to go by, this is for some reason an utterly terrifying concept. We can at least feel for Zim as far as him being bullied by his schoolmates is concerned, maybe excluding Dib, who knows his evil identity. But that doesn't change how sinister it is to send a multitude of children into space to a horrible dimension of pain, suffering, and moosiness. Perhaps the most evil thing about this plan is the fact that Gur's dialogue in the background of Zim explaining it reveals that the walnuts Zim gave to the moose were his. How could you steal your best friend's walnuts, Zim? You better make it up to him with a song. Maybe bow down before the power of Santa. That is, unless you'd rather be crushed by his jolly boots of doom. Christmas, for most, is a time of giving and receiving. It's a time for joy, cookies, singing, etc. Even the most dastardly villains can't resist its charms. Or I guess they can. Upon learning about Santa, Zim comes up with a plan to take over the world for good. Using the universally loved character, Zim develops a Santa suit to trick the entire human population into believing he's Santa. The plan is simple: gather humanity together to announce a new Christmas tradition. Well, less a tradition and more of a one-time event where humans are beamed to their doom, being slaves to the Urkin race for the rest of their lives, even having the future slaves in question build the machine themselves. Fortunately for humanity, the Santa suit somehow has a mind of its own, and the more Christmas cheer it's exposed to, the harder it is for Zim to resist the urge to become as holly and jolly as the Santa we know and love. We actually do have to give Zim some minimal credit here, since he helps defeat the Santa suit when it goes ballistic, even telling Dib to deal the final blow. But that doesn't change the fact that this was one of the closest plans Zim ever had to being fully successful. Hopefully the Easter platypus is a bit nicer. Alright, now let's take a trip from the main series to the grand finale movie. Opening the Florpus hole has to be Zim's most reckless and destructive deed ever. After years of radio silence, Zim, along with Gur, made his grand return and unleashed his ultimate plan to conquer Earth. By using the power of Professor Membrane's newly patented membracelets, Zim plans to move the Earth to the path of the almighty tallest after finding out they don't plan on visiting him. This ends up creating a spatial anomaly known as the Florpus hole. It's like if you put a black hole and a wormhole in a blender, sucking in whatever's nearby and colliding it with alternate realities. This was a universal threat, and even knowing that everything, including himself and his beloved tallest, would be destroyed, Zim's only concern was preparing for the tallest to arrive, so he could show off his progress. He actively fights off Dib, Gaz, and the Professor as they try to save the planet, and while they were able to narrowly save it by the power of Mini-Moose, Zim's careless plan nearly caused countless realities to collide with Earth, ultimately destroying it. In hindsight, Zim is probably proud of how close he came to destroying the Earth for good here, but from our perspective, it's one of his most utterly vile deeds. Being on such a large scale, it might be shocking that this isn't our top pick, but we have to remember that opening the Florpus hole wasn't Zim's goal. He just didn't mind that it happened. On the other hand, we're fairly certain it's impossible to accidentally steal kids' organs. The episode Dark Harvest is arguably the most infamous episode in all of Invader Zim, even though it's one of the very first. When Zim has to go to the nurse's office over a bad case of head pigeons, he realizes that the nurse will find out that he's an alien due to his strange anatomy. As a result, he comes up with a solution, stealing the organs of kids around the school for himself, and replacing them with random objects. More organs means more human, so he thinks.
More organs means more human. It will work.
This causes all of them intense agony, including Gaz, who characteristically doesn't seem to care. And Zim, being Zim, isn't bothered by this at all. He's more than willing to snatch a ludicrous amount of organs from school children, even taking 6 hearts, which would have undeniably killed those they were taken from. To him, the more organs he has, the better. Seeing all the other students in pain throughout the school is a horrifying sight, but it does nothing for Zim. We knew that his ultimate goal is to conquer Earth and ultimately destroy it, but even for someone trying to do that, the Dark Harvest is downright inhumane. Or inalien, inarcan, whatever. Either way, there's no denying that this organ-plundering escapade deserves the gold medal of evil.